Do me a favor, if you can hear my voice, go ahead and raise your hand through the Zoom interface. There we go. Okay, so at least some of you can hear me, so that seems to be working. Thank you for doing that. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about Nebula. Nebula is our cloud-managed networking solution. So we'll start going through it. So the idea behind Nebula is to make it simpler and easier for you to roll out new networks, to manage your customers and manage their networks. So we'll start with a little bit of history here. We were the first quote-unquote full-stack cloud networking solution that was built and designed for small to medium business. Nebula launched all the way back in 2016, and we've been improving it ever since. So back when we launched, if you were looking for a cloud-managed networking solution, the options were pretty much Cisco, Meraki, or Aerohive, and Aerohive had a very limited selection of anything outside of APs. Both of those solutions were really aimed at the enterprise space. And so we could take a look and see what Meraki was doing and saying, hey, you know, there's a lot of potential here for the SMB space if we can make it affordable for your smaller guys to be able to afford it. And that's what we ended up doing. So, you know, Nebula supports at this point pretty much all of our access points, almost all of our security gateways, and our most popular switches. So we'll talk here a little bit about, you know, what's included with Nebula and some of the terms that we use. So one of the main terms you need to know is Nebula Control Center. Nebula Control Center is pretty much where you do everything when it comes to managing and setting up your products. It is our web interface that you access by going to nebula.zyxel.com and logging in. And then from there, we've got access to your security gateways, your firewalls, your access points, your switches, and we also have a mobile app. It's specifically optimized for phone usage for managing stuff out in the field. It's also a great tool for installers, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is in just a few slides here down the road. So this is, you know, real quick, this is, you know, everything that goes into deploying a new network for one of your customers. So with Nebula, we're able to reduce or eliminate a lot of this stuff for you, saving you both time and money. So some of the things here where you save some stuff is when it comes to setting up your devices, you don't have to do any on-site configuration in most cases. The cloud itself acts as your monitoring platform. The cloud automatically has access to the devices. There's no need to set up VPNs or port forwarding for doing remote management, etc. So we'll start talking a little bit about Nebula. So it's designed to get you up and running in just a few minutes. We've got a number of wizards and tools in there that cover some of the basics that you need. So it's possible to buy an access point and have it plugged in, up and running with a custom captive portal page in under 5 minutes. So we do a lot here to simplify things and speed things up when it comes to the initial setup. And you can start setting up your equipment before you even get it. So while you're still maybe trying to nail down the final quote and the exact hardware that you need, you can all at any point go into the Nebula interface, set up a new customer, start setting up sites, and starting to set up the general configuration that you're going to use on those sites. Once you do have the hardware, you simply add it to those sites. So you can do it manually through the web interface, or you can use the mobile app and the camera on your phone to scan in the QR code that's on the outside of the box on most Nebula products. Setting up the security appliance is a little bit more tricky, but when it comes to switches and APs, you just scan the QR code and assign it to your customer and what site of that customer's it's going to be assigned to, and then you ship it off. There's no reason to take the hardware out of the box. Once you plug in the hardware, it's got the Nebula agent built in. It will automatically reach out to the cloud, see if it's been assigned to a customer yet, and if so, it'll automatically download the configuration it needs for that customer. It'll also handle any sort of firmware updates that may be needed. You know, oftentimes product sits around at distribution for a while and maybe 1 or 2 versions behind. Nebula will automatically update the firmware for you. And to use Nebula, there's nothing else required. So there's no local controllers that you need. There's no cloud keys. There is no virtual machines. There's no software that needs to be installed anywhere. Everything is built directly into the Nebula compatible hardware itself. And again, all management is done through the cloud, which in our case is hosted on AWS. But from that point forward, everything you need to do is done here through any place, through the cloud. So anywhere you've got access to a web browser and an internet connection, you have access to all of your customers and all of their sites. So some of the features here that are built in with Nebula, easy guest access. We have the ability to do captive portal directly on an access point, or the ability to handle captive portal on the gateway. We've got a lot of flexible options when it comes to how users get on. You can have a terms of service page. You can have them log in with a username and password. You can have them create their own username and password. You can have them log in with Facebook. And then on top of all of that, we've got the ability to customize the captive portal page that they see. We've got sort of a GUI interface that you can do some minor changes. If you want some more advanced changes, you can download the HTML and CSS files, modify them to your heart's content, and then go ahead and re-upload those to Nebula to display. Or alternately, we can have the captive portal point to a web host of your choice, so you can get some real fine customization there or capture additional information that you need. When it comes to the wireless access points, we've got all the stuff you would expect. We've got smart mesh, allowing you to easily add access points in areas where you don't have physical wired access. Also has the ability that if something happens to a physical connection to the AP can automatically put itself into mesh mode and find a nearby AP that still has a physical connection to be able to backhaul itself. Of course, we support up to WPA3 and 802.1x authentication, and we support all the industry standards for fast roaming and bandwidth management. On the switch side of things, you'll find a lot of the features that you would expect to see on our switches carried over into Nebula. The ability to delegate PoE intelligently rather than using the industry standard, freeing up extra budget so you can put more devices on the same switch. Built-in ACL rules, VLAN configurations, 802.1x authentication, loop guard, DHCP server guard, etc., and virtual switch stacking, so you can configure ports across multiple switches simultaneously. So when it comes to Nebula, there's really no reason to go on site short of a physical problem. All updates are handled over the air, so any configuration changes you make in the Nebula website will automatically be pushed out to the devices at your customer locations. That also includes things like firmware updates. Those are all handled through the cloud. And on the gateway side of things here, we make VPNs easy. It's easy to do site-to-site VPNs. Simply choose the sites you want to network together, choose the topology type you want, and we'll handle everything else on the back end. When it comes to remote users, we have the ability to send out scripts via email that the user simply runs the script and it'll handle configuring the remote client. So that works on Windows, it works on Mac OS, and it works on iOS. So Nebula was designed from the ground up with the idea that you're going to be having multiple customers, and those customers each may have multiple sites. So everything when it comes to the layout of Nebula was done with this idea that you need the tools to easily be able to jump from customer to customer and see what's going on. This is just showing here, you log in, you choose a customer, and you'll be presented with this view here. This is a list of all of the sites that customer may have. So if you've got somebody that's got multiple locations or you're helping out a local franchisee with multiple locations, you'll be able to quickly see all of their locations that they have and what's going on those locations. From there, you can choose a location and it takes you to this dashboard here. The widgets that you see are customizable, so you can choose what you can see. But you can see things like how many users are currently on the wireless network, if any of the devices assigned to that site are offline for some reason, PoE utilization versus budget. And if you're using our gateway, we've got breakdowns showing you which users are using the most bandwidth, which applications are using the most bandwidth on your thing. If you've got our security services optimized, you can see what sort of attacks have been blocked and what users those have been. Up here at the top are two drop-down menus. One is a list of your customers, one is a list of their sites. So it makes it really easy once you're in the dashboard to move from customer to customer, site to site. So this is showing you here the status view that you can see for the APs. So you can see we've got a graph over time, and you can change, the time period there. So you can see what your bandwidth utilization has been over time. And then down here, you've got a list of your clients. And again, what you see here is fully customizable, what columns you have. But on this example here, you can see whether or not the user is currently connected to the network or not. You can see what the device name of that user's was. You can see what model of Wi-Fi chipset they're using. You can see which SSID they were connected to, what technology they were using. Was it an 11B client? Was it a Wi-Fi 6 client? MAC addresses, signal strength, channel being used, all sorts of good stuff to help you troubleshoot things there. Here's a view here of our switches. So you can see down here we've got graphs of bandwidth utilization over time. We've got a view of all of the ports on the switches and easily color-coded so you can see which ports have a Ethernet cable plugged in, which ones do not, which ports are providing PoE power, which ones are not, and the speed of those wired connections if they do have a wired connection plugged in. And then if you want to configure things, you simply choose all the ports you want to configure. A screen pops up here and will allow you to change, VLAN settings, bandwidth settings, all sorts of stuff simultaneously across multiple ports on multiple switches. And everything I've been talking about up to this point is free. Nebula does not require a license to use it. So Nebula is free. There are no limitations as far as the number of devices you can manage or the number of customers and sites you can manage. It's all free. Now, we do have some licenses that unlock some additional features, and we'll talk about those here going forward. So when we first launched Nebula, you had to buy Nebula hardware, specific hardware that can only be managed, similar to how Meraki does it now, right? With Cisco, if you want web management, you have to buy Meraki products. If you don't want cloud management, you have to buy the standard Cisco product. Over time, we have moved away from that. We may still have a few models that are available through the channel, but for the most part, we've moved over to something that we call Nebula Flex. So Nebula Flex products are going to be products that can be managed either the traditional directly or products that can be managed in the cloud. So you will see that being used on all of our different products out there. So if you're looking to do Nebula management, you can look for Nebula Flex. One of the nice things about doing it this way is you can standardize on the same hardware for all of your customers, regardless of whether or not you're going to be using Nebula to manage those devices. We also have what's called Nebula Flex Pro products. So what's the difference between Nebula Flex and Nebula Flex Pro? The primary difference is Nebula Flex Pro products are bundled with 1 year of our Nebula Pro license. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few slides. When it comes to our APs, Nebula Flex Pro products actually can be managed one of 3 ways: standalone, in the Nebula cloud, or with a controller. So those products for APs, if they're labeled Nebula Flex Pro, you've got 3 different management modes you can use. So switching between modes is really pretty simple. To switch between standalone and Nebula, by default, most products are going to be managed standalone. However, if you take that product and add it to and assign it to the Nebula cloud in one of your customers, that product will automatically detect that and will automatically reboot itself into Nebula Cloud mode. If at any point you want to put it back in the traditional standalone management, you simply remove it from your inventory in Nebula, and the product will automatically reboot in standalone mode. The only catch here for you is that the configurations are not the same between the two. There are some feature differences between cloud and standalone. So when you switch from one mode to another, the device essentially factory resets itself and needs to be reconfigured. So something to keep in mind if you're switching back and forth between modes. So we've got a breakdown of products here. The top row is our Nebula Flex products. So that is our 1, 2, and 2-digit 5 series and 9 series products here. So basically anything that's an AP that's only got 2 number digits in the name, such as NWA50AX, NWA90AX, those are Nebula Flex, as are anything with 3 or more digits that starts with the number 1 or 2. On the switch side of things, it is our 1900 series, so that is our 1920V2, and 1930 series. And then on our security gateway products, it is our USG Flex products. And then going up to Nebula Flex Pro, it is all of our 3 or more digit APs that start with the number 5 or 6. It is our switches, so it's the GS1350 series, GS2220 series, and the XS3800 series. Those are all Nebula Flex Pro. And then it is our USG Flex products that come bundled with a UTM license. That bundled UTM license also includes 1 year of ProPack. And then also our ATP series of products. Nebula ProPack license is bundled with the Gold license that you need to use the features on the ATP. So now let's talk a little bit more about Nebula licensing. It used to be fairly simple back in the day. It has gotten a little bit more complex over the last year, so let's go through it. The first one we want to talk about is basically the set of features that's unlocked in the Nebula Control Center. Again, Nebula Control Center is that web interface that you were using. So there's basically 3 levels of services here. We have a base pack, a plus pack, and a pro pack. So these unlock different features to go up to Plus and Pro. Base is free, Plus and Pro are a paid license that you can buy. You can buy monthly licenses, you can buy yearly licenses, or you can buy 2-year licenses. If at any point the licenses expire, it simply falls back into the base pack mode. So you're never locked out of your equipment, unlike some of the other cloud-managed products. So when it comes to this, each device needs to have a license. So every device in the organization needs to have it. So an organization is how we basically refer to customers. So when it comes to management, usually each customer has their own organization. And each organization can have multiple sites. So when it comes to the Plus and Pro Pack licensing, every device in the organization needs to have a license. So if you have a single customer with multiple sites and only some sites need the Plus or Pro Pack license, you would want to split that customer up into 2 orgs, one that's going to be licensed and one that is not. So basically every device needs to have a license applied to it to unlock the features of the Plus and Pro Pack. If you add a new device to an organization that has an existing set of licenses, you will be given a 15-day window to add a license to that product. Otherwise, the whole organization will drop back to the to the base pack until all devices again have a license assigned to them. And same thing, if a device has a license expired, we give you a 15-day window to renew that license before the organization is dropped down to the base pack. So now let's talk about some of those feature differences between these different licensing things here. So base pack, everything else includes unlimited devices, unlimited sites, unlimited organizations for management. All versions include our sort of zero-touch auto deployment, where for the most part there's no configuration required of the individual hardware directly. Simply plug it in and it'll automatically reach out to the cloud to download its configuration. All of them allow you to push out firmware configurations through the cloud and provide at least basic scheduling for those firmware updates. All versions give you full access to the iOS and Android apps. When it comes to logs, that's where we start to see some differences here. So when it comes to the logs that are stored in the cloud, the free version of Nebula keeps 24 hours of logs available in the cloud. Plus Pack keeps a week's worth of logs in the cloud. And then Pro Pack keeps a year's worth of logs stored in the cloud. Another difference here is when it comes to admin accounts. So with the free version of Nebula, You can have up to 5 different admin accounts for each customer that you're managing. Plus Pack gets you 8 accounts, and then with Pro Pack, there is no limit to the number of admin accounts you can have assigned to each one of your customers. We also have a cloud-based authentication database. So if you're choosing to use that, so that can be used for MAC filtering, it can be used for captive portal logins, it can be used for 802.1x authentication. So the free version of Nebula gets you 50 entries into that cloud database. Plus Pack unlocks an additional 50 for 100 total. And then Pro Pack has no limit to the number of entries into that cloud-based database. And of course, regardless of which version you go with, you can always use your own Radius server for managing those accounts. This is just if you want to use our cloud-hosted database. So all versions give you access to the core features of the products. All versions give you access to the ability to do MAC-based and 802.1x authentication. All versions give you access to captive portals and authentication through those captive portals. So now where we start to see some other differences here. So if you want to do advanced firmware scheduling, you do need the Plus or the Pro Pack. So that gives you very granular scheduling control. So you can set different schedules based on type of device. You can set schedules for individual devices. You need the Plus or the Pro Pack if you want to generate reports and have those emailed to your customers or yourself. It's also required in order to get email notifications if devices go offline for some reason. Plus and Pro Pack also unlock an automatic network topology view to help you for troubleshooting issues, where we'll automatically generate a view showing you which devices are plugged into which other devices on your network. And then the ability to use what are called Wi-Fi vouchers. That is something that requires Plus and Pro Pack. So that basically allows you to set up an admin user who can generate unique usernames and passwords that are good for a specified period of time that you define. So you would see this in maybe a hotel type deployment or maybe even in certain cafe type deployments of guest networks. So you need Plus or Pro Pack to do that. And then Pro Pack unlocks a lot of additional diagnostic features here for you. So for instance, it keeps an audit log of every configuration change that's made over the last year. So you can go back through and see which of your admin users made certain changes if you're trying to troubleshoot something. Pro Pack unlocks the ability to clone existing organizations and the ability to use templates to push out changes across multiple sites. Pro Pack unlocks the ability to back up and restore configurations over time. Pro Pack unlocks the ability to open a ticket directly with our headquarters in Taiwan. If you are using a Radius server with advanced AAA functionality for the guest portal, that requires Pro Pack to unlock those additional features. It also unlocks additional Wi-Fi and switch features such as per port-based bandwidth and some other stuff there. So those are the differences between the different levels here. And again, if at any point you or your customer decide not to renew a Plus or Pro Pack, it simply drops back to the free version. You do not get locked out. So I probably should have removed these slides. This is just going through here in a little bit more detail, highlighting some of those Pro Pack features. We'll just go ahead and skip these since I spent a lot of time going through them. One thing here to highlight here, Pro Pack gives you the ability to do dynamic pre-shared key. So traditionally, if you have different users who need different network resources, the way you would set that up is you would set up different SSIDs, and any users that connect to a certain SSID get set with a certain VLAN. The challenge is you're limited to the number of SSIDs you can broadcast per radio, and also for every different SSID you're broadcasting, you end up using a little bit more of your airtime for broadcasting beacons. So the new way of doing this is to use what's called dynamic pre-shared key. You have one SSID which each user uses, and rather than authenticating with 802.1x, you assign each user their own unique pre-shared key. So one SSID and each user has their own pre-shared key. When the user authenticates, Nebula is able to see which pre-shared key they used to connect, and then can assign VLAN tags based on their pre-shared key that they were used. It also gives you sort of the flexibility of 802.1x without having to actually configure it, and it allows you to do things like, if an employee leaves the company, you simply deactivate their pre-shared key. Another feature here is machine learning that ProPack unlocks. So this is basically something where we track and graph end user performance, and our AI has the ability to sort of take a look at what's going on for any users that have poor connections and be able to make some changes to your network automatically to try to solve those issues. Let's also go back. One other key thing here. Our 1350 series switches have some advanced features in them that aren't available in our other switches. And to use those features, you do need a ProPack license. So one of those key ones here is the ability in Nebula to automatically ping connected PoE devices. And if the device stops responding, we can automatically power cycle the connected device to reboot it. And if you're doing IPTV, the ProPack unlocks some additional reporting and some AI where we can monitor what's going on those IPTV users, see any issues with those streams, and make suggestions for network changes to make to be able to solve those issues. So here's that automatic network topology view I was talking about that Plus and ProPack unlock. So again, we'll automatically generate here a list of all the devices on your network and help graph out which ones are connected to which other ones. So that's it for the different licenses for the different feature classes in Nebula Control Center. We've also got a license that is just for admin accounts, and that is our MSP license. So with the Pro and Plus packs, those are based on the organization, and each device needs to have an active license. With MSP Pack, the license is assigned to a specific admin user, and it unlocks features across all organizations that admin user has access to. So generally, this is a license that you would assign to whatever the main account is that your company uses to manage your users. So it unlocks some additional features here. One of the key ones here is this Msp Portal View. So basically, it allows you to go in and see all of your customers on one screen with a snapshot of what's going on with those customers, how many sites each of those customers have, whether they're using the free or one of the paid versions of Nebula. And if paid, it'll let you know if their accounts are expiring or have expired. It'll let you see all the devices they have online and let you know any that are offline. So that's a new view that makes it a little bit easier for you there. It also makes it a little bit easier for you to manage licenses across multiple users. It allows you to rebrand the Nebula interface with your company's branding, so you can add your logo into the GUI there for you. You can remove our support contact details and replace them with your support contact details. On the admin side of things, it unlocks a new feature called Teams. So you can create, groups of different admins. So instead of having to assign individual admins to different customers, you can simply assign teams and then simply add or remove users to those teams. And it gives you the ability to synchronize certain settings across multiple customers. So that is the MSP Pack. We've also added a new feature here where if you have the MSP Pack, all of your customers, including your free customers, get access to email alerts if a device goes offline. So again, this MSP license is separate from the Plus and ProPack licenses, and this isn't assigned to an individual customer or device. This is assigned to an admin account and unlocks these features for that admin on any organization that they have access to. And then on the security side of things, we have different licenses for our different security products. And again, these are independent essentially of what version of Nebula they're using, whether they're using Plus, Pro, or Free. So for the most part, these are our UTM security features that can be used on our security licenses. If you have one of our older NSG gateways, we have the NSS Security Pack. It unlocks IDP, application patrol, content filtering, and antivirus at the gateway. If you are using one of our USG Flex products as your gateway product, then we have the UTM Security Pack, which unlocks web filtering, IPS, application patrol, malware blocking, SecuReporter, collaborative detection and response, which allows you to push out certain security features to the access points, and the security profile sync. If you are using one of our ATP gateways, then you would use the gold license to unlock the additional security features that the ATP offers. And then we've also got our secure Wi-Fi license, which works on the ATP and USG Flex. So let's explain secure Wi-Fi. So secure Wi-Fi essentially allows you to turn an access point into a VPN appliance for your remote workers. So you do need to have one of our security gateways at the central office. And then what you can do is you can then give your employees a specific access point that you've unlocked this feature for. They take it home, they plug it into their existing home router system, and it creates a special SSID that user can log into using 802.1x and two-factor authentication. And when that user connects to that SSID, that traffic that they generate is then tunneled back to the USG gateway at the central office. So it's a way of doing VPN that's a little bit easier as far as the end user is concerned. You know, you don't have to get onto their laptop and set up the VPN software and install certificates and do all of that. You don't have to give them a traditional VPN appliance, which is usually a type of router, and then they end up in a situation where they're plugging this VPN router into their existing router provided by their ISP, and they get stuck behind double NAT. Instead, you're simply giving them an access point. It plugs into the existing router, so there's no double NAT, and then they've got that special SSID that you manage through the Nebula interface, that if they connect to it, they can essentially be VPN'd back into the office. We've also recently rolled out here, just last month, a new type of licenses just for the access points called Connect and Protect. So one of the things we run into out in the field is that oftentimes your customer has a gateway that's been provided by their ISP. And they either cannot replace that gateway, or they don't want to replace the gateway because they're worried about support issues with their ISP or what have you. But that customer wants UTM type services. So rather than putting yourself in a double gateway scenario where you're sort of double natting yourselves, another solution here is you can offer UTM type security just on your access points, and that's our Connect and Protect service. This is done on a per device basis for the license, but unlike the Nebula licenses for the Nebula Control Center, this can be done on a per device basis. So maybe you've got a retail store, they've got a number of APs back in the warehouse, and they've got one or two APs in the storefront where guests may be going to. You can simply put the license on those two APs that are out in the public area and leave the service off the other APs back in the secure area where only employees will have access. So Connect and Protect is providing UTM type services using an IP reputation filter. So you can see here we can block access to sources of spam, IP addresses that are known to have scanners or botnets operating on them, IP addresses of servers known to host phishing sites, proxy sites, etc. So that Connect and Protect license is available on our NWA 1123 ACV3, our WAC 500, and our WAC 500H. We also have a Connect and Protect Plus license. So it's got that same UTM type filtering that's available, but it also has the ability to unlock bandwidth throttling on an application basis. So you can go in and say, hey, you know, I want people to be able to watch Netflix, but I want to limit the bandwidth per user or per application to this amount of bandwidth. So that's something you can do there to make sure, you know, Netflix isn't eating up all your bandwidth and other applications can still get a reasonable amount of bandwidth. So that functionality is available on the NWA 110AX, the NWA 210AX, and then our WAC 510D, 610D, 630S, and 650S. So essentially all of our professional grade Wi-Fi 6 access points. So if that sounds like something you're interested in and you haven't played around with it yet, we do have a live demo. Simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, and there is a link to open up a live demo site so you can play around with the interface. If you're one of our partners and part of our partner program, you can talk to your salesperson about getting 60-day trial of some of our Nebula compatible hardware to test in your own lab. And then lastly, I've just been asked here to point these out to people. Our webinars are archived and published on our YouTube site. We also publish on that YouTube site video documentaries on success cases, some walkthroughs on how to configure or use certain features on our products. So check that out. It is Zyxel America channel. There are lots of different Zyxel channels from each different region or area. So ours here in the US for you guys is Zyxel America channel. And then we're on LinkedIn as Zyxel US channel. If you have any questions, send them in with the question and answer box. So far, I have not gotten any questions today. And then again, my email is ShawnR, SHAWNR, @Zyxel.com. Feel free to reach out to me offline with any questions, feedback on today's webinar, suggestions for future webinars, etc. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate your feedback. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Feel free to email me offline if you had something that you were in the process of typing up. Again, it's ShawnR, SHAWNR, @Zyxel.com.